Martin Lawrence brought a raw, electric energy to television screens that captivated millions. But beneath the laughter and catchphrases of the iconic 90s sitcom lies a complex web of creative battles, personal demons, and cultural revolution that most fans never fully understood. The show that defined a generation of black entertainment concealed as much as it revealed. What if the very personas that made Martin legendary were both his greatest creative triumph and his personal undoing? What if the show's behind-the-scenes reality reflected the very struggles of representation it sought to overcome on screen? Let's pull back the curtain on one of television's most influential comedies and examine what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Let's discover the hidden costs of groundbreaking television and the truth that transforms how we understand Martin's cultural legacy. This is the untold story that changes everything you thought you knew about Martin. At its core, Martin wasn't just a sitcom. It was a revolutionary act disguised as a half-hour comedy. The seemingly simple story of radio personality Martin Payne and his relationships with girlfriend Gina, best friends Tommy and Cole, and frenemy Pam carried deeper significance than most viewers realized at the time. Behind the catchphrases and character transformations lay a profound struggle for authentic black representation, creative control, and the personal cost of comedic genius. What most fans never fully understood was how Martin Lawrence's virtuosic multiple character performances, from Shanae Jenkins to Jerome to Mama Payne, represented both extraordinary talent and an unsustainable burden. The cast now reveals that these characters weren't just comedic vehicles, but Martin's way of exercising complete creative control in an industry that rarely afforded black creators such freedom. There was genius in what Martin was doing, but also something desperate, reveals one writer from the show's early seasons. He was determined to create a world entirely on his terms, even if it meant literally playing half the neighborhood himself. But that creative brilliance came with consequences that would eventually threaten the very existence of the show, and the real relationships at its center. When Martin premiered on Fox in August 1992, the television landscape for black representation was drastically different than today. The Cosby Show had ended its groundbreaking run just months earlier, leaving a void in mainstream black family representation. But Martin Lawrence and the show's creators weren't interested in following that template of respectability politics. Set deliberately in Detroit, a proudly black American city with working-class roots, Martin rejected the upper-middle-class trappings that had defined The Cosby Show. Instead, it embraced the cultural energy of hip-hop, the raw comedy of the deaf comedy circuit, and the lived reality of young black professionals, navigating relationships, careers, and identity. Fox, still a fledgling network at the time, took a chance on Lawrence's vision, giving him unprecedented creative control for a black entertainer. Fresh off his success from House Party and Def Comedy Jam, Martin brought an authenticity that resonated immediately with audiences starved for representation that felt true to their experiences. When Martin debuted in 1992, Fox was only 6 years old as a network, still defining its brand identity. The show quickly became one of the network's highest-rated programs, averaging 11 million viewers at its peak. What viewers didn't see was how every episode represented a delicate negotiation between Lawrence's raw comedic instincts and a television industry still uncomfortable with unapologetic blackness. The Detroit setting wasn't just a backdrop, it was a statement. Martin Lawrence was a hurricane of comedic energy on screen, transforming into wildly different characters with nothing more than a wig, a change of clothes, and his extraordinary physical comedy. To millions of viewers, he appeared fearless, boundlessly confident, and completely in control. But castmates now reveal a more complicated reality. Martin was incredibly insecure about certain things. Tichina Arnold, who played Pam, has admitted in recent interviews, the more pressure he felt, the more he would retreat into these characters. Shanae, Jerome, they were armor in some ways. When Martin was feeling vulnerable as himself, he could always hide behind them. This duality created a fascinating paradox. The very personas that made him iconic also isolated him from his cast members. When Lawrence was playing multiple roles in a single episode, he spent hours alone in makeup and costume changes while the rest of the cast bonded. The characters that brought him closest to the audience often distanced him from his colleagues. Thomas McCall Ford, who played Tommy, once reflected that Lawrence's performance schedule was inhuman at times. He'd be Shanae in the morning, then Martin, then Mama Payne in the afternoon. The physical and mental toll of that, switching personalities, voices, physicality, it wore on him in ways none of us fully appreciated at the time. Behind the scenes, Lawrence struggled to separate himself from his creations, sometimes remaining in character between takes or during production meetings. What audiences perceived as comedic brilliance was also a complex coping mechanism, a way for Lawrence to process the pressures of sudden fame, creative responsibility, and being the load-bearing wall of a network hit. And as the show's success grew, so did the weight on his shoulders. In the middle of the second season, a pivotal creative choice altered the trajectory of Martin forever, one that most fans never recognized as the turning point it was. Fox executives, seeing the popularity of Lawrence's character work, pushed for more Shanae, more Mama Payne, more Jerome. What began as occasional character appearances became central to the show's identity. The original concept was much more grounded, reveals a former Fox executive who worked closely with the production. It was supposed to be primarily about Martin and Gina's relationship, with the secondary characters supporting that core story. But when we saw the ratings spike every time Martin played one of his characters, the mandate came down. More characters, more often. Lawrence initially resisted. He had envisioned Martin as a vehicle to establish himself as a leading man, not just a sketch performer, but the numbers couldn't be ignored. Episodes featuring his character work consistently outperformed the more straightforward relationship stories. In a fateful production meeting before filming episode 16 of season 2, Lawrence reportedly conceded, "Give them what they want," he told the writer's room, according to multiple sources present. But make sure Martin and Gina's story doesn't get lost. This decision fundamentally altered the show's DNA. Scripts were restructured to accommodate multiple character changes. Production schedules grew more complex. And, most critically, the power dynamic among the cast shifted dramatically. Lawrence's workload increased exponentially, while screen time for other cast members became more variable. What seemed like a purely creative choice would eventually create the conditions for the behind-the-scenes tensions that nearly destroyed the show. The physical reality of producing Martin was far more grueling than the effortless comedy suggested. For Lawrence especially, the schedule was punishing. A typical episode featuring multiple characters required him to arrive hours before the rest of the cast for makeup and costume preparation. While other actors might finish their scenes and leave, Lawrence often remained until final wrap, sometimes working 16-hour days. There were times when Martin would fall asleep standing up between takes. Carl Anthony Payne II, who played Cole, has revealed. The makeup team would be touching him up, and his eyes would just close. Then action would be called, and boom, he'd snap right back into character, full energy. The physical transformation between characters wasn't just about wigs and costumes. Lawrence would alter his entire physicality, changing his walk, his posture, even the way he held tension in his face. Medical professionals who have studied his performances note that the constant physical transformations likely took a significant toll on his body. During the height of the show's popularity in Season 3, Lawrence was simultaneously filming 2 movies during hiatus periods, essentially working year-round without substantial breaks. His weight fluctuated noticeably during this period, dropping almost 20 pounds at one point due to exhaustion. For the rest of the cast, a different kind of strain emerged. Their character development became increasingly dependent on Lawrence's availability and energy. Scenes would be rewritten on shooting days based on which version of Martin could be prepared in time. This unpredictability created a tense working environment where other actors couldn't fully prepare. Sometimes we'd get new pages minutes before shooting, Tisha Campbell has said. You'd have prepared emotional beats with one character, and suddenly you're playing the scene with Mama Payne instead of Martin. It required a kind of adaptive acting that was exhausting. The relentless pace eventually created fissures that would crack the foundation of the show's chemistry. Watch the 3rd season of Martin again with careful attention, and you'll notice something most viewers overlook: the subtle visual language of isolation. As tensions built behind the scenes, the blocking and composition of scenes began to tell a story the dialogue never explicitly addressed. In early seasons, Martin and Gina share the frame intimately and frequently. Their physical chemistry is palpable as they move through scenes together, finishing each other's sentences and responding to subtle physical cues. But midway through season 3, a shift occurs. More scenes feature them talking while physically separated. Martin at his radio console while Gina stands by the door. Conversations across rooms rather than on the same couch. The camera doesn't lie, notes a cinematographer who worked on multiple episodes. We were told to create more separation in how we frame them. At the time, I thought it was just a stylistic choice, but looking back, it was documenting the real distance growing between them. Another easily missed detail, the evolution of Shanae Jenkins. In early appearances, the character is broadly drawn, but shows moments of genuine vulnerability and dimension. By season 4, these humanizing moments diminish. The character becomes more reactive, more one-dimensional. Lawrence was streamlining the performance, making it physically easier to maintain as his energy reserves depleted. Perhaps most revealing is the changing dynamic in group scenes at Martin's apartment. In seasons 1 and 2, the ensemble genuinely appears to enjoy each other's company, with natural overlapping reactions and shared laughter. By season 4, watch carefully how often reaction shots are isolated rather than shared. The edit creates the illusion of group chemistry that the raw footage could no longer capture authentically. These visual breadcrumbs tell the story that would eventually become public, but only for viewers paying extraordinarily close attention. What began as creative tension eventually erupted into open conflict that threatened to end the show entirely. In December 1996, midway through filming the 5th season, Tisha Campbell filed a lawsuit against Martin Lawrence, alleging sexual harassment, sexual battery, and related claims. She stopped appearing in episodes, creating a crisis for the production. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the industry. Campbell had been Lawrence's primary scene partner for 5 years, their characters' relationship forming the emotional core of the series. Her absence left a void that no amount of creative workarounds could truly fill. What most viewers never fully understood was how the very structure of the show, built around Lawrence's multiple characters and improvisational style, had created the conditions for boundaries to blur. The lawsuit alleged that Lawrence's behavior had become increasingly unpredictable, with the line between character work and personal interaction becoming dangerously indistinct. The show existed in this gray area where Martin was encouraged to stay in character, to improvise, to push boundaries, explains an industry expert familiar with the case. That creative environment, combined with the power imbalance of him being both the star and an executive producer, created a perfect storm. Fox executives faced an impossible situation. Their hit show was imploding, but production schedules demanded resolution. Behind closed doors, network leadership worked frantically with lawyers, producers, and both stars' representatives to find a path forward. The solution they reached reveals just how severe the breakdown had become. Campbell would return to complete the 5th season, but under extraordinary conditions. She and Lawrence would never share the same set. Their scenes together would be filmed separately and edited to create the illusion of interaction. What appeared on screen as the natural conclusion of Martin and Gina's story, his character taking a job in Los Angeles, creating a reason for less screen time together, was actually a carefully constructed workaround for a workplace that had become untenable. The bitter irony of Martin lies in how its behind-the-scenes conflict mirrored the very struggle it portrayed on screen. The show fought to present authentic Black relationships and culture in an industry that had historically marginalized both. Yet internally, it struggled with power dynamics and communication breakdowns that threatened those same authentic connections. Martin Lawrence created groundbreaking television that expanded possibilities for Black creators who followed, all while his own creative process became increasingly isolated. The more characters he developed to populate Martin's world, the more removed he became from the collaborative essence of ensemble television. Martin gave so much of himself to that show that sometimes I think there wasn't enough left for the real relationships that needed tending, reflects a writer who worked across multiple seasons. He was fighting so hard for creative control, for his vision, that he couldn't always see the impact on the people around him. The show that celebrated black love and friendship became infamous for the fracturing of those bonds behind the scenes. The characters Martin and Gina embodied relationship goals for a generation of viewers, while Campbell and Lawrence couldn't occupy the same physical space. Perhaps most poignantly, as Lawrence's characters proliferated, his authentic connection with the audience deepened, while his connection with castmates deteriorated. Viewers felt they knew Martin intimately through his raw, personal comedy, even as those working closest with him felt increasingly distant from the real person behind the performances. This fundamental contradiction would shape not just how Martin ended, but how it would be remembered and eventually reappraised. Despite its troubled final season, Martin achieved cultural breakthroughs that transformed television. It proved definitively that unapologetically, black comedy could draw massive, diverse audiences without compromising its authentic voice. The show's peak ratings demonstrated what industry executives had long doubted, that specificity breeds universality. The series broke ground in its portrayal of young black professionals navigating relationships in a major urban center. Martin and Gina weren't struggling. They were thriving in their careers, challenging the limited narratives previously available for black characters on television. Their relationship problems stemmed from communication and compatibility, not economic hardship or social issues, a refreshing change that normalized black love stories. Perhaps most significantly, Lawrence's character work expanded the boundaries of what one performer could accomplish on a sitcom. His portrayal of Shanae Jenkins in particular, a character that could easily have devolved into problematic stereotype, instead became a complex, fan-favorite force of nature who consistently got the better of Martin himself. What Martin did with those characters was revolutionary, notes a contemporary comedian influenced by Lawrence. He wasn't just playing dress-up for cheap laughs. Each character had a specific worldview, a backstory you could feel even if it wasn't explicitly stated. That's why people still quote them decades later. The show's influence extended far beyond entertainment, seeping into language, fashion, and cultural reference points that remain relevant today. Phrases like "talk to the hand," "you go girl," and "don't start none, won't be none" became part of the vernacular, transcending their origins to enter everyday speech across America. Martin reached its ratings peak in 1994, averaging over 11 million viewers weekly. Perhaps more impressively, it consistently won its time slot among viewers 18 to 34 across all demographics, not just African American audiences, disproving network assumptions about niche programming. What began as a vehicle for a rising comedy star had become nothing less than a cultural institution, even as the very foundation of that success was crumbling behind the scenes. The DNA of Martin can be traced through countless shows that followed. Its influence is evident in the character-driven comedy of Atlanta, the relationship dynamics of Insecure, and the unapologetic cultural specificity of Blackish. Lawrence's willingness to center black language, references, and experiences without translation for white audiences opened doors for a generation of creators. When Issa Rae created Awkward Black Girl and eventually Insecure, she cited Martin as proof that authentic black stories could find commercial success. "What I learned from Martin was that you don't have to water down the culture to make it palatable," she has said. "The specific becomes universal when it's done with conviction." Donald Glover's Atlanta took Martin's Detroit and reimagined it for a new generation, maintaining the unapologetic blackness while exploring new narrative territories. The character Darius, with his surreal non-sequiturs, shares creative DNA with Cole from Martin, both characters existing slightly outside the show's reality while commenting on it. Behind the camera, Martin alumni went on to shape television in profound ways. Several directors who cut their teeth on the show later worked on defining series like The Bernie Mac Show, Everybody Hates Chris, and Blackish. Writers from the Martin Room eventually contributed to everything from The Boondocks to Empire. Even the business model of television felt Martin's impact. The show's success helped cement Fox's identity as a network willing to take chances on voices excluded from traditional channels. This blueprint would later influence networks like the WB and UPN. and eventually streaming platforms actively seeking underrepresented creators. Most significantly, Martin demonstrated that a black show could become a cultural touchstone without sacrificing its voice or following conventional wisdom about crossover appeal. It drew audiences on its own terms, changing industry assumptions about what could succeed and who could lead a hit series. The ripples continue to expand today, visible in everything from memes to musical references to the career trajectories of everyone involved with the groundbreaking series. Nearly 3 decades after its premiere, Martin remains relevant not just as a nostalgic artifact, but as living, breathing cultural currency. Episodes still stream heavily. Quotes still punctuate conversations. The characters still appear on merchandise and in social media references. This endurance isn't accidental. It's earned through a combination of groundbreaking authenticity and timeless human truth. At its heart, beneath the comedy and conflicts, Martin captured something essential about relationships, identity, and community. Martin and Gina's romance wasn't perfect. It was real. They argued, misunderstood each other, reconciled, and grew together. This core authenticity resonates across generations because the fundamental challenges of partnership haven't changed. The friendships portrayed between Martin, Tommy, and Cole, between Gina and Pam, reflected the chosen families many young adults build in urban environments. These connections, with all their complications and comforts, created a template for sitcom friend groups that continues today. What makes the show's legacy particularly poignant is how the very real conflicts behind the scenes have become part of its story rather than diminishing its impact. The reconciliation between Lawrence and Campbell decades later, culminating in their reunion for a 2022 special, offers a redemptive arc that adds depth to the show's legacy rather than undermining it. What happened between us was real, and it was painful, Campbell has said of their eventual reconciliation. But what we created together was also real. Both things can be true. This complexity, the ability to hold contradictory truths simultaneously, is perhaps why Martin continues to feel so relevant. The show never offered simple answers about relationships, ambition, or identity. It presented characters working through these questions in real time, sometimes getting it wrong, sometimes transcending their limitations. In our current cultural moment, as we re-examine the art we consume and the people who create it, Martin offers a case study in separating creative legacy from personal failings while acknowledging how they intertwine. The show's endurance suggests that audiences are capable of holding these contradictions, appreciating the groundbreaking cultural contribution while recognizing the human cost behind it. Watch Martin again with fresh eyes, and you'll see both a comedic masterpiece and a document of creative struggle, a show that changed television while challenging everyone involved in its creation. If you appreciate what this cast gave to create this cultural landmark, hit like and share your favorite Martin moment in the comments. Some flames burn so bright they leave permanent impressions, even after the cameras stop rolling.